Hello and welcome to Uncommon Law, my podcast about true stories from my life experience of over 50 years as a lawyer and trial judge. This is a look at the law from the inside out, stuff they don't teach in law school. This is Judge Rudy Greco, retired justice of the New York State Supreme Court. My best friend Gino owned a little bar and restaurant called the Racing Club in Manhattan, which was a delightful place. It was an island of normalcy in a sea of phoniness and pretense. And it was located on the Upper East Side, not far from the headquarters of a television studio and a British auction house, which both of which supplied a large part of the clientele. The decor in the place, it was really, really nice. It was very relaxed. I gave him the name Racing Club, and the decor was the walls draped with all kinds of pictures of racing of every sort imaginable. We had Grand Prix photos, track and field photos, horse racing photos, yacht racing photos, ice skating, speed skating photos, you name it, we had it there. There was a beautiful, beautiful portrait in the dining room, a photo portrait of Secretariat, which was a classic that I gave him for a gift. But the whole place was really nice. And as you can imagine, in that atmosphere, one of the main topics of conversation was sports very often. And the crowd was a collection of contrast. I mean, there were, first off, most important, there was a large contingent clientele of good-looking, pretty young women. So that's great because that attracts everybody else. And that attracted, in this instance, police from the local precinct, doctors from the local hospitals. We had Australian journalists mixing with Japanese research immunologists, a Scottish rare book and document expert, all sorts of people, a sprinkling of wise guys who are always around New York bars somehow or another, and just a Tunisian chef and waiter, a Dominican dishwasher. It was just a whole gamut of people, and very, very loose and very, very nice. And also, we had many of the local Upper East Side rich and famous characters would drop in, like Dick Clark and people, celebrities of that nature. But it was a very small D democratic place. And aside from talking about sports, which was always a part of the general conversation, the other topic was always women. That was a good topic that kind of kept everybody occupied. And as to the sports, the bartenders were both pretty authoritative and fans and knew what they were talking about. One of them was a dear friend, Charlie Anders, and Charlie had been a World War II combat veteran in the Pacific. He was a Navy corpsman who was attached to the Marines on various campaigns in through the islands. And Charlie actually hated the Marine Corps because he always felt, as a corpsman, that they incurred too many casualties because they wouldn't wait for air support or they wouldn't wait for artillery support, and they would send their guys in a gung-ho attitude and needlessly get them injured and slaughtered. And Charlie didn't like that. And he used to say that if it wasn't for the flamethrower, we'd still be fighting the war and prying out these dedicated Japanese troops that were hiding in the caves. He said these guys didn't want to give up. They used to make cartoons of these skinny little Japanese guys with glasses and buck teeth. He says that was the furthest thing from the truth. He says these guys were terrific troops and tough as nails, and ideologically, they weren't going anywhere. He says, thank God for the flamethrower. Well, anyway, Charlie was also one of the most knowledgeable boxing fans that I had ever come across as a fan. I mean, he wasn't in the business, but he really knew his stuff, especially about the skills and the various abilities comparing one fighter to another. He was really, really knowledgeable and very reasonable guy. I also enjoyed a little bit of a good reputation in the place when it came to boxing because I had been an amateur boxer and I had been a licensed professional manager and second. And I was also, for some years, the lawyer for Gleason's Gym. So I enjoyed a little bit of status in that department, in that little bar and restaurant. But, who doesn't enjoy that? Everybody likes to be well regarded. But it was no big deal. So one night, I was watching the evening news when the anchorman, I caught the tail end of a discussion between the anchorman and the sportscaster. And they were talking about the then upcoming, highly anticipated Roberto Duran versus Sugar Ray Leonard bout, which was about to take place about 10 days hence. And I only caught the tail end of it. And I made a mental note to ask because both the sportscaster and the anchorman were regular clients in the bar and restaurant. And I thought maybe at my next opportunity I would catch one of them and ask them what they thought. Well, next time I walked in, lo and behold, there at the bar is the anchorman. And he's accompanied by the very, very pretty weather girl who happened to have been an ex beauty queen herself. And he was chattering on and making nice with the weather girl when I interrupted his conversation, which he didn't, reflexively he didn't like. But I said, "Excuse me, but I saw you last night talking with the sports guy, and I caught the tail end of the conversation. You were talking about Leonard and Duran, right?" And I guess his first reflex, which was to be upset with me, he set that aside. That was subdued because now I was giving him some attention and some status in front of the weather girl who he was trying to impress. And he said, "Oh, yeah, we did. We had a conversation and his mood changed." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, what happened?" He said, "Well, the sports guy told me Sugar Ray Leonard is a sure thing. He's gonna beat Duran easy, no problem." I said, "Really?" I said, "Oh boy." And then I sensed, my killer instinct kicked in. And I said, "Wait, this is an opportunity." I said to myself, "This guy is a fish. Let me hook him and reel him in, maybe. I didn't know about trolling. We didn't use that expression in those days. It was back in the mid 80s. But I guess that's what it was. And I said to him, "Well, your friend likes Leonard." "Oh, yeah. Yeah, very much so." I said, "Well, he doesn't know what he's talking about." And sportscaster looks at me and says, "What? He's the most informed sports guy I've ever met in my life." I said, "Yeah, but he never boxed. He's not in the business. He knows it as a fan." I said, "He has a superficial knowledge." I said, "He must have been drunk if he's picking Leonard to beat Duran, because that's not going to happen." "Oh, really, really?" I said, "Yeah." Now he's trying to make an impression in front of his weather girl companion. And I knew I have him. I said, "You know what? How would you like to bet the fight?" He said, "Well, that's a possibility, yeah." I said, "Well, Duran is a 3-1 underdog." I figured I'd take every advantage I could. He says, "Oh, yeah, but, by time fight time comes, it'll probably be even money." I said, "I tell you what, let's talk about this next week. Maybe we can make a bet." He said, "Good enough." Now, I had the weather girl as my witness to this whole conversation, which was good. A week goes by, and now it's about 3 nights before the fight. And I see him at the bar. Same situation, same company, the whole same thing. He's there with the weather girl. They're having a drink, they're talking. And I walk up. I said, "Hi." I said, "Hey, listen, about the fight. It's even money now. You were right." I said, "You want to make the bet?" "Oh, I thought we made it the bet." He's trying to skate out of this, because this guy, by the way, was a notorious cheapskate who was a dollar tipper. And he was notoriously cheap. He had short arms, as we say, in the bar business. And I said, "No, no, no, we didn't make a bet. Um, we left it for this week." I said, "How would you want to bet?" He goes, "Sure." He says to me, "How much do you want to bet?" Now, I know this guy's a cheapskate, so I sent it right back to him like this was a tennis match here. And I said, "Well, that's up to you. Anything you want to do." Because I was secure he's not going to bet a lot of money because he's a dollar tipper, and it's not happening. And he said, "Okay, how about 2?" I said, "Sure." "2 what?" He said, "Well, 200. How about 200? I'll bet on Leonard and you will bet 200. You can bet on Duran and even money." I said, "You got it." And we shook hands. Well, 3 nights later, the fight took place. And Duran won a convincing victory. He really laid a beating on Ray Leonard because Ray Leonard made a tactical mistake. He went toe-to-toe with Roberto Duran, which Duran loved. That's Duran's style. And Ray Leonard went right into and tried to beat Duran at Duran's own game. And that was a big, big mistake. And the fight was decisively won. And Ray Leonard caught a beating that night. Well, I let this guy stew with the money, burning a hole in his pocket because I knew he was suffering. As a dollar tipper, he wasn't going to be happy to part with $200. I purposely avoided him for 3 or 4 nights. And my friend Gino said, "This guy's looking to pay you." I said, "Yeah, well, as long as he's looking to pay me, let him twist in the wind. I'll be there, at the end of the week." Okay, I show up, and he sees me, and it's breaking his heart. And he reaches in his pocket and he pays me the $200. And I told him, I said, "I'll tell you what. If you want to make another bet sometime to get even, that's up to you. I'll be happy to talk to you about it." He said, "Okay, we'll see. We'll see." Well, About a month later comes Muhammad Ali versus Larry Holmes for the heavyweight title. Now, this was a big fight. So I said, well, let's see what this guy's gonna say. Maybe this is his opportunity. Oh, I saw him again at the bar, and I said, how about the Ali Holmes fight? He said, well, who do you like? I said, no. Who do you like? I said, you lost the bet. I'll give you a choice. And I'm hoping that he's picking, the right one. He said, well, I spoke to the sports writer again, the sportscaster, and he said that Larry Holmes is much better than Ali at this stage of his career. But the Muslim influence is going to be a factor in this fight, and they're going to get to Holmes, and Ali's going to win. And I couldn't believe my ears. I said, this is sheer nonsense to myself. I said, oh boy, how lucky can I bet? I said, well, I guess then you want to bet Ali. He said, oh yeah. I said, then we'll the same amount? Sure, $200. I said, great. I'll take Larry Holmes. Now, this was a sucker bet because Larry Holmes, when he was Ali's sparring partner years before, was getting the best of Ali in the gym all the time. Now, it was years later. Ali, 2 years before, ducked a mandatory title challenge with Larry Holmes because he knew he was going to lose, and he claimed he was retired. And he didn't really retire. He was one of those fake retirements. But now he was going to fight Larry Holmes again 2 years later when Larry Holmes was at the peak of his career. And Ali, the difference was he needed the money now. So he had to fight Larry Holmes to make the money. And this was a foregone conclusion that he was going to lose. Sure enough, I cashed the bet. And I win again. When I see this guy again, the anchor man, and I said, hey, sorry you lost, if you want better luck next time. He said, no, I know when I'm beat. No, you know about this stuff, I don't. He says, next big fight comes up, if you want to bet, let me know, and I'll join you as a partner, we can bet together next time. I said, okay, we'll see. A couple of months go by, and up comes the much anticipated rematch between Leonard and Duran, this time in Montreal. Well, I liked Duran. I still like Duran. And he asked me, he said, who do you like? I said, well, I still like Duran. I have no reason to change. I said, but I like Duran. But the fight is about a week away. And I never saw him again. And I actually didn't bet. Well, Duran-Leonard took place. And this time was a reversal of fortune because Leonard, learning from experience, used his height and his reach, his superior hand speed and foot speed to box and keep away from Duran rather than confront him toe-to-toe. And he frustrated Duran, and Duran ended up in a notorious no-mas situation where he gave up, much to his shame for the rest of his career. Well, I didn't go to the bar right after the fight. A few nights passed, and right after the fight, he walked into the bar, and he saw my friend Gino. Now, Gino was aware of the whole history of our betting here with this guy and his obnoxious character and everything else. And Gino, being a good friend, said, well, I guess you cleaned up. You must have bet Leonard, your guy Leonard. You always liked him. You must have cleaned up last night. He said, no. Your friend, the lawyer, told me he liked Duran. And Gino, God bless him, in my absence, delivered the coup de grace. He said, wait. He said, you didn't bet Leonard? He said, no. He said, because the lawyer said to bet Duran. He said, well, I spoke to him yesterday, and he was all about Duran up until the last day, up until yesterday, when he got some inside information, and he went to Leonard. Big time. Cashed a big bet on Leonard. Didn't he tell you? And this crestfallen anchorman, whose heart was now broken, who hadn't had the courage of his convictions to bet Leonard anyway, he was totally deflated. And Gino, God bless him, he did me a favor. I wasn't even there. And the point is, a coward dies 1,000 deaths. A hero dies but once, as we say. But in New York is a tough town, and this guy got taken down a peg. Too bad, too sad. Thanks for listening. Come back next week for another episode of Uncommon Law, lessons they don't teach in law school. I'm Judge Rudy Greco. Court is adjourned.